Om. Namaste. During the month of February, we will come back to Sri Aurobindo's mighty Maitri Upanishad, the book, The Mother. Short though it be, 6 chapters only, we'll spend the entirety of February, each Sunday, in that book. Leading into it, let us look at the concept of Satchit Ananda a little more closely. This week we look at Sat, the nature of existence. Next week on Sunday, the nature of Chit, Chit Shakti, conscious power. And that final week in January, left to us, Ananda, bliss, delight. So I know that we've been all through this many times together, even when we went through the Taittiriya Upanishad. We spent a good deal of time analyzing even the Sanskrit in that collective study. Sri Aurobindo comes to formulate his philosophy, his vision of the life divine, only after a series of profound experiences, deep spiritual realizations, which begin in a way with the departure from identity with the ego as central to universal becoming. This was a strong feature of what occurred within him when first he meditated at the direction of his temporary guru and found himself in a nirvana, a kind of blowing out of the personal existence and an absorption into the sheer reality of Brahman, divine being. The universe itself, one could have said, was like a moving picture screen before him, that it seemed phantasmagorial. Only Sri Aurobindo never saw cinema, so trying to find a way to express the emptiness of the universe by comparison with the fullness of Brahman was what was striking to him. He was in that consciousness permanently. He never left it. That silence, that status of immunity from the movements of the world was without interruption. And yet, within roughly a year's time, he had another great experience and realization, one that came to him in manifold ways over a period of time, and he came to see the world not as phantasmagorial, but as the very living body of a divine person, which in Indian terminology was Vasudeva, the being, the Godhead, who populates as the universe, all the forces within it, all the beings within it. Even what seems to be abhorrent to us was seen by his vision as being wonderful, delightful. Being bitten by terrible ants, which would cause agony in any other person, he found them to be ebullitions of delight, that our normal channels in which we move are not the only ones available to us. As he grew in consciousness, he could hold within himself all the suffering of the universe, all the joy of the universe itself, and identify each part of it, whether it was inward or outward, as an aspect with the signature of the divine being. It was real. It was not phantasmagorial any longer. He did not lose that essential realization of Brahman beyond the fields of space, beyond the partition of time into past, present, and future. But he could see that both these things were true. A dynamic universe expressing the silent, impassive being. But wasn't silent. No. It had within it these polarities. Universe, not universe. Time, timelessness, eternity. Etc., etc. So, this silence of nirvana gave way to a dynamic universalization of a single person populated everywhere, the cosmic divine being, realizing that only that is. There is no other. Reminding us of the question somebody put in France to a wise person. Mother remarked about it, saying, the sage was petitioned for an answer as to whether or not they counted gods and goddesses in India, and the sage acknowledged that they did. So, how many are there? Just one. So that is indeed the experience that Sri Aurobindo had in his being by the time he came to Pondicherry and took his seat there, which was within a cave of tapasya. Those rooms, wherever they were a trysting ground for him to continue to work and dynamize his realization with Krishna, Vasudeva, whatever name you give it, later Mahashakti. And he took careful notes about all the many realities and potencies that were finding expression in him and fashioning him into something new and different as he began to explore an integral yoga. So these ideas of all in one, one in all, are part of Vedanta, part of the great tradition stretching back into the Upanishads. But the completeness we find more in Ramanuja than in Shankara, who wants to divide between the only real, which is a silent, all-encompassing reality that has no time and space, and everything else is a falsehood and a lie. Sri Aurobindo never came upon the philosophy of Abhinavagupta in Kashmir, but that philosophy and the Trika system bears strong similarities with Sri Aurobindo's, even articulating a notion of a supreme consciousness that might be very like Sri Aurobindo's notion of a supramental being. But if we're going to look at this large concept of Sat Chit Ananda, then we need to look at the three pieces which are one. We need to look at Sat this week, Chit next week, Ananda the week after that. Sri Aurobindo, of course, when he looks for harmonies from the Indian tradition, finds them frequently in the Upanishads themselves. So let's note that this chapter that we're sort of basing some insights on this time, chapter 9, has as its opening the pure existent, a quote from the Chandogya Upanishad, which is in chapter 6, section 2, verse 1. One indivisible, that is pure existence. This is an affirmation that pure being is not divided. Pure being remains whole. Even if it is expressed, it does not forfeit its unity and its sovereignty. But there's another verse in the Chandogya, which occurs a bit earlier in the 3rd chapter, the 14th section, and the first verse there, that says, verily, this whole world is Brahman, from which he comes forth, without which he will be dissolved, and in which he breathes. Tranquil, one should meditate on it. Now, verily, a person consists of purpose. According to the purpose a person has in this world, so does he become on departing hence. So let him frame for himself a purpose. This is a challenge to the seeker. If you want to understand what is the reality of the world, you have to focus. You have to make it really important. It must become essential to you so that you can realize what is essential behind the universe, what is essential in your deepest self. We know the term essential. Esse, from the Latin, refers to that which is behind the phenomena, something that is remote from our usual experience. It is not something that we can sense with our sight, through sound, with our touch, etc., etc. It is something that inheres behind. What is that? So, the Upanishads, like Sri Aurobindo, they reject easy solutions. The Chandogya Upanishad, which we just quoted from, rejects the idea that the source of the cosmos is non-being, is asat. It says, in the beginning, this world was just being, one only without a second. That's a different stance from what the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad would say. It says, There was nothing whatsoever here in the beginning. By death indeed was this covered, or by hunger, for hunger is death. He, death, created the mind, thinking, let me have a self, a mind. Then he moved about, worshipping. So, to the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, death creates the worlds, and it begins from nothingness. But even the Brihadaranyaka asserts that it only seems that way. There is a Sat, and then Sat comes into being. The Asat that it refers to, as Sri Aurobindo has noted in The Life Divine, is not really non-being. Asat is what cannot be identified positively only as being. It is something that exceeds even the scope of what being might be. It drops the positivity as it reaches back into its own infinity. What that is, the mind with its divisions into real and unreal, has no permission to come. The mind cannot understand that. The philosopher must be frustrated. It is only the seer, the mystic, the yogi, who can penetrate this reality and live in it. So, this unknown can be recognized with a profound experience. We can fix upon it. We can enter into it. We can commune. We can become one with it as a pure existent, as that which is beyond all that we have experienced, what is truly essential or fundamental. This existence has a scope. It has dimensionality that to our experience is infinite, unrestricted. Clearly, because somehow this universe comes from it, we refer back to it, and so we can, through a conscious climb, ascend the ladder of existence in this universe and reach a pinnacle from which we can rise in consciousness without attachment back into that essence. So this idea of Satchit Ananda is different from simply the idea of a pure existent, exalted above and beyond the world. Satchit Ananda is full of consciousness, full of power, full of bliss. This is a concept that appears first not in the Taittiriya where we expected to find it, if you remember when we read through it, and I think to your alarm, you found that, although it's been mooted as the place where this concept exists, it is not. Instead, we have to look for other sources much later. If the Taittiriya was written, let's say 800 BCE, several hundred years go by before the elements of existence, consciousness, and bliss are brought together in one phrase. And it's done in, probably the Rama Uttara Tapani and in the Aurobindo Upanishad, but not earlier than 100 BCE all the way up to 400 CE. So a long stretch of time. Somewhere in there, these two texts were composed. And this is where it appears. And it appears not as an idea of an existence, something that's impersonal, something that's unmixed, like homogenized milk, metaphysically, but instead, it is in terms of theistic Vedanta. In other words, the term Satchit Ananda applies to a divine person, to a cosmic, vast being, whether it is in Vaishnavite terms or in terms of the mother goddess, the Mahashakti. Satchit Ananda Rupini is how the Sri Lalita Sahasranama captures the notion that she, the supreme goddess, sports in this form as Satchit Ananda in motion. So it isn't there in the monistic school of Vedanta, but later in theistic Vedanta. The ideas, again, of existence, pure, of consciousness, sheer, and of delight, unmixed, appear in a number of Upanishads, but not all together. For Sri Aurobindo, this composite concept is fundamental, and it is really the bedrock of all that he writes in the Life Divine. Much more important a concept in his philosophy than the idea of the linking world of Satchit Ananda through the supramental consciousness to reach into mind, life, and matter. The supramental is an aspect of Satchit Ananda in self-definition. It does not exist without Satchit Ananda. It is Satchit Ananda which is the cause and eventually the course of the manifestation and the evolution. But these terms, which now we can refer all the way back to the Aurobindo or to the Rama Uttara Tapani, are texts that likely never were on the desk of Sri Aurobindo. So, in this chapter, number 9, The Pure Existent, let's look first at that term, existent. He does not say existence. He says existent, which can suggest personal being. As against, if he wrote pure existence, there is no connotation that there could be a being there. It's just raw existence. But when he says the pure existent, we see that he means or can suggest that that aspect, the personal, exists validly with the impersonal. For Sri Aurobindo, as with Sri Ramakrishna, there is no unbridgeable chasm between the two. They are the same reality, experienced differently in the mind. So, to summarize, we could say, that is. That is all. And that is you. The transcendent, the universal, and the personal. All are realities, each leaning into the other. Pure being must adhere beyond all the conditions known to us in space and time. It must remain itself. Pure being, cannot be confined. Pure being cannot be defined as an absolute beyond, yes, but it can also not be restrained. It can energize and move and distribute seemingly itself into multiple poises. So it must both be real as an essential, unmoving being, and at the same time promote, sponsor, permit, and personally express a dynamic, flowing cosmos, thrown out into beautiful, significant forms. Existence is an infinite. It is a reality beyond all scope, and it dwarfs the puny individual and the ego's attempt to restrain it and say it must logically be this, it must logically be that. It outstrips anything the mind can offer in assessing what it is. It cannot be thought. It cannot be measured. And mind, the measurer, is lost when it comes to understanding being. It can only become quiet and become one with being if it wishes to become wise. So this movement, possible to pure being, is vast when it asserts a universal form. But it is always based on silence, on its imperturbability, going back to and stemming from its pure essence. There may be waves on the surface, but the ocean deep is undisturbed. They are not divided. There or here, it is samam Brahma. It is the same Brahman, whatever the scale. It is indivisible. It is united in its essence, but appears to be distributed and divided. But it is never divided. It cannot be divided. Always it is one. We saw in the Upanishad, it is one undivided. In context, all aspects of existence interpenetrate. They are inseparable, and they are intrinsic to each other. So the transcendent breathes forth the universal. The universal supports and manifests the individual, which is capturing something of the unique personhood of the transcendent cosmic person, of this unity between transcendence and universality and personal being. Tomes and tomes and tomes have been written. But it is up to the proof of experience. It is in the yogic ascent that one can finally be satisfied that this is the nature of being, that I am at once a soul moving through time, but always secure in my eternity. I am above, I am below. I adapt myself into these forms, invited or driven by cosmic will as an expression of transcendent being. This must become the daily, the hourly, the moment-by-moment experience of the yogin. This truth is not the truth of the superficial ego, who believes in its suffering, believes in its conquests. Here we speak of a soul of immortality whose essential being is cognate to that existent. They are consanguineous in the universal play, a fancy word that means we're sharing the same blood or sap of existence experiencing itself. All in the manifestation is that. None of these aspects is subordinate or inferior. Essentially, they are all valid. Their status is, at the very least, sempiternal, that is, existing through time, but we're really housed as beings in time inside an unmoving eternity. We never lose the now. As the individual grows, as the individual evolves within, upon the same universe and ground of being, we find a path that leads us to a culmination in which we recover what we seem to have lost, but which was always secretly deposited within us. But the journey helps us reveal the treasure that was always there. It was inside our carriage all along. We didn't know it until we awakened to the reality around, the reality above. Then we had happiness. Then we knew what next we must do. So behind the universal phenomenon, remember, it's singular. Sri Aurobindo often uses this idea, not phenomena, the many, the phenomenon. The universe is a phenomenon. It is one thing. Now, just to take a brief aside, other philosophies want to divide and say that time has no connection from moment to moment. It's discontinuous. For Sri Aurobindo, like other seers in Vedanta, no. All of this change occurs within the composite being. It is all in this one being, Sat, continually churning, but never asat. It is never not being. It is always the same thing. And one sees that it is a pure absolute, an undefinable reality, and that we can't take the pieces of it, what seems to be discontinuous, and tie it all together and aggregate it from pieces. That's trying to put Humpty Dumpty back together again. It is the mind that broke Humpty Dumpty. And to get back to that state, we have to achieve a consciousness of unification, which is what yoga is about, and establish ourselves once again in the true essential being, true to the world, true to ourself, and always true above. So from inner experience, we know, because many have done it, that we can reach an existence which is without quality, without quantity, without form, and that existence isn't distilled into only one thing, our peace chant tells us that is full. This is full. Purnam Araha Purnam Idam, that one. The full is taken out of the full. If you take out the full from the full remains. You haven't subtracted anything. Everything is there. You haven't lost on either side of it. That reality is both of these things. Both are full. Both are valuable. Both are worthy. So how this existence, this Sat, posits itself in the movement without losing its essence is both the mystery and the nature of real being. The mind will ask, how can the Absolute achieve what seems to be contradictory? It exceeds the dual nature of language. So it can't be understood philosophically, linguistically. Whether you're writing in Chinese or you're writing in Sanskrit, you're still going to be puzzled at the end. The Tao cannot be described. When you try to describe the Tao, it escapes you. When you try to dualize in Indo-European language, what is that reality? It outstrips your capacity to measure, to define. The mantra must capture some significant element of it and represent it and say, this is a sign. This is not the full thing, but this is a sign. And if you use the sign well, it will take you towards that. But you have to plunge into it. You must make the conscious decision for you, who seem to be separate, to enter into that ocean of conscious being, where you will find yourself not only one in your own integrity, but one with all. So Sri Aurobindo has a wonderful set of sentences. If you're looking at this chapter, I think they're going to occur on page 85 and 86. So I'm going to read a section. The pure existence. I'll start again. The pure existent is then a fact and no mere concept. It is the fundamental reality. The movement, the energy, the becoming are also a fact, also a reality. The supreme intuition and its corresponding experience may correct the other, may go beyond, may suspend, but do not abolish it. We have, therefore, two fundamental facts of pure existence and of world existence, a fact of being, a fact of becoming. To deny one or the other is easy. To recognize the facts of consciousness and find out their relation is the true and fruitful wisdom. And then a consummating sentence. World existence is the ecstatic dance of Shiva, which multiplies the body of the God numberlessly to the view. It leaves that white existence precisely where and what it was, ever is and ever will be. Its sole absolute object is the joy of the dancing. So, I think we can turn to Savitri, and this time to page 297 for a few lines here. Canto 15. The kingdoms of the greater knowledge. All once perceived and lived was far away. Himself was to himself his only seen. Above the witness and his universe, he stood in a realm of boundless silences, awaiting the voice that spoke and built the worlds. A light was round him, wide and absolute, a diamond purity of eternal sight. A consciousness lay still, devoid of forms, free, wordless, uncoerced by sign or rule, forever content with only being and bliss. A sheer existence lived in its own peace, on the single spirit's bare and infinite ground. Out of the sphere of mind he had arisen. He had left the reign of nature's hues and shades. He dwelt in his self's colorless purity. It was a plane of undetermined spirit that could be a zero or round sum of things, a state in which all ceased and all began. All it became that figures the absolute, a high vast peak whence spirit could see the worlds, calm's wide epiphany, wisdom's mute home, a lonely station of omniscience, a diving board of the Eternal's power, a white floor in the house of all delight. Here came the thought that passes beyond thought. Here the still voice which our listening cannot hear, the knowledge by which the knower is the known, the love in which beloved and lover are one. All stood in an original plenitude, hushed and fulfilled before they could create the glorious dream of their universal acts. Here was engendered the spiritual birth. Here closed the finite's crawl to the infinite. 1,000 roads leaped into eternity, or singing ran to meet God's veilless face. What do you say? Enough for one evening? I send my love to you from Pensacola, my cherished friends and comrades on this luminous path. Namaste. Jai Ma.